Hello again. Just wanting to continue our conversation about crime statistics and deviance. We've spoken about the way that the deviant might be constructed, the role of media, the role of police and law enforcement, and all those other agencies in supplying statistics and stories about what's happening regarding deviancy. But what effects might all this have within the community? So we have these different parts, these different organizations and structures working together, sharing their information, whether it's being presented fairly or not. Surely there is some sort of outcome that happens in society. 1972, Cohen published his book, Folk Devils and Moral Panics. In it, he was exploring what happens when these stories are being told in society that generate these very strong emotional reactions within people and across society. So he developed this idea of the moral panic, the idea that media incites panic and worry, that values and deeply held principles in society are being put under threat and are now in jeopardy. Cohen talks about the creation of the folk devil, this unknown deviant in the imagination of the people that draws together all their fears with distorted stories and misunderstandings. And as a consequence, there are these things that happen within society that can have very serious outcomes that can affect the way that society moves forward. He notes that things that could have been dealt with and contained locally are given this big narrative so that they now have national import. And these are very serious issues, and the public needs to get on board with this. So this idea of moral panic is something that results in deep change within society. Cohen talks about subcultures, the way that certain crimes and behaviors are associated with different subcultures. You've got your young delinquents, you've got your maladjusted immigrants, different groups of people who are identified and may be involved in particular types of violence in the street or break-ins or sexual assault or simply trying to invade Australia. There's a control culture that seems to come into action as well. So that having identified what is going on, people within society say we need serious sanctions and punishments to be brought against these people. We want these things to stop. The moral barricades are then policed by a whole range of people. You've got the political editors, you've got religious leaders, you've got politicians and other right-thinking people who will come out and make statements about what is going on and how this is wrong and how this is against the national interest and suggesting ways forward. Experts will be wheeled out and they will give their opinions on how things should proceed, and there'll be agreement between them. So they will be brought out because there is this tacit agreement between them already. And so this momentum is being built about how we should deal with this very important problem that has been brought to our national attention. We then have the possibility that there will be harsh and perhaps unpopular social controls brought into being. These might be things like offshore detention or new anti-terror laws, because we can't have people walking around with bombs in our society. Or perhaps they will be harsh lockdown laws. And I dare say a lot of you have experience with that sort of thing at the moment. With these problems that are identified and magnified within society, they are stylized by the media, and in extreme cases, they will be used for government propaganda as well. The most obvious example is Hitler and what he did, and the way that he demonized the Jews and said that we must get rid of them. This is for the preservation of the Aryan society. And so this demonization and then this rise in emotional response was able to be used to carry forward his agenda. If you want to see some more of the way that that's represented, but in a comedic way, and I know that sounds a little bit strange, but I recommend you have a look at Borat movies, the way that Borat portrays Jewish people there. And remember, Borat himself is Jewish, so he has this very interesting insight that he provides there about the way Jewish people have been demonized. And also Jojo Rabbit, very interesting in the way that they present demonization and its influence and its outcomes within society. So if you're looking for something to look at, I have to warn you, they can be disturbing in parts, but they're quite insightful from that aspect of sociological thinking. Cohen's identified 5 different stages that takes place with moral panic. First is that the threat is defined. The threat is defined as to what are the moral principles that are being undermined here, and yes, this is a problem that needs to be addressed. Secondly is that the person or persons who are responsible for this are depicted quite readily by the media. So it's easy to identify who it is who is responsible. Is it the African gangs? Is it the persons of Middle Eastern outlook? So there are ways that society is then able to identify and point the finger at the person who is being portrayed as threatening national values and important principles. As a result of this, there is this increase in public concern. And that is then followed by responses from those in authority, so that something is going to happen and it's validated and they maintain their authoritarian positions, which leads then to the 5th stage. Either the moral panic recedes and things will continue as they were, or there will be a resolution through the enactment of laws and other social changes. So then we have the observation of there is social morphogenesis, change in our society, or social morphostasis. There will be this continuity of things the way that they were within our society. Cohen also identifies 5 different actors who we need to consider in these things as well. The first actor is the folk devil, him or herself. So however that is being portrayed, that is perceived as one of the actors in Cohen's conceptualization here. Law enforcement also have a part to play in the upholding of the principles and the stating of the laws that are to be maintained rather than to be challenged and usurped. The news media is also obviously involved, not just in the communication, but in the way that they incite panic, in the way that they conceptualize and narrate the stories of these people who are now demonized. Politicians also come into play and make their statements and exercise their authority. And all this happens not just out there by these different people in their different capacities, but also by the public in general. So the 5th actor is the general public and the way that they respond and the way that they allow or the way that they advocate for change to take place. Moral panic is something that is seen from time to time in Australia in our news media. There have been instances where moral panic has been invoked when it came to the milk powder that's used for baby formula, all of that vanishing off the shelves, and Chinese people were exporting it and sending it home to China at great profit. So we've had moral panic there. I wonder if we are also seeing moral panic at times in COVID. We have people we're being told they're usurping the law and they're traveling where they shouldn't travel and they're carrying this disease, and there's this moral panic that is invoked, and then harsher and harsher laws are enacted so as to control the movement of people. So there are different ways to look at what is taking place in our society presently. In the tutorials, we'll be looking at moral panic around African youth in Victoria. A couple of years ago, there was some serious news reporting and terrible things being said about the violence being enacted by African youth in Victoria. So we will look at that in the tutorials. Think about this aspect of moral panic. How do you see these things playing out, these principles and these different actors being brought together as the result of narratives about what constitutes deviancy and about how deviancy should be controlled and minimized? Wish you well as you ponder on these things. Bye.